No, it's been done. Have you done it? Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming on this cold, dark night. And we're very pleased to have two presenters today. Avril Kettner from the British Deaf Association and Hilary Firth from the Scottish Government. Avril started work with the British Deaf Association in 2005, and she's been responsible for many areas such as sign language policy in the UK, but in fact she's been involved with the British Deaf Association practically all her life. And she regards one of her major achievements in life as contributing towards the BSL Act. An important part of her life. And Hilary joined the Scottish Government as a civil servant really from 2001. She first was interested in housing and then she moved into the Equality Unit in 2005 and stayed with the Equality Unit and was very influential at the early stages of thinking about BSL and linguistic access group, and then went away to do some early years things. Fortunately came back to the Equality Unit just in time to help us get the BSL Act. So who better could we have than these two presenters tonight to discuss the BSL Act? Thank you very much for coming. We're going to start with Hilary, then we're going to have Avril, and I think there will be a lot of opportunity for discussion and debate as well. I'm sorry about the two mics.
I shall have to try not to get excited and not move too far away, or the microphones will go and smash on the floor. So I'll try and stand in one place. Okay, well, it's really nice to be here this evening. I always get the email notifications about the Ed Sign lectures, and they always look so interesting. But I've never managed to make it along to one. This is my first Ed Sign lecture, largely because I have domestic responsibilities that make it difficult to do anything in the evening. So I'm really glad to be here tonight. I'm really pleased to be here in Murray House, which was, of course, where Dr. Mary Brennan was a reader in Deaf Studies, and she, of course, was very influential, I think, in helping us to make progress in Scotland towards BSL, and in helping to build strong foundations for the legislation that we now have in place. So it feels very appropriate to be here tonight for a lecture talking about the BSL Scotland Act. We all have to get used to calling it the Act and not the bill. So that's quite nice. We keep having to correct each other. I am going to talk about the Act and a bit about the Scottish Government's approach as the bill was making its way through Parliament, because as I'm sure you know, it wasn't the government bill, it was the members' bill. So I'm going to talk about how we influenced the bill as it was going through Parliament, and talk about implementation, about next steps. And in many ways, Avril and I will be covering some of the same ground, but I'm talking from the perspective of government, of a public body who will be subject to the Act, and Avril will be talking about some of the same things, but from the perspective of the BSL community. So hopefully, the two will complement each other. But before I talk about the Act, I want to go back a little bit and give some history about BSL in Scotland, just to set the scene a bit. The Scottish Government's interest in BSL predates Mark Griffin's bill. It predates Cathy Craiggie's original proposals for a bill. In fact, our stated interest in BSL goes back to devolution. Just after the Scottish Parliament was established, we set up the BSL and Linguistic Access Working Group, which still meets today. And that helped to ensure that the new Scottish Executive, as it then was, had access It's enabled us to address issues of concern to the deaf community over a number of years. And I was thinking just on the way here, if devolution happened in 1999, and the BSL and Linguistic Access Working Group was up and running, chaired by the Equality Unit where I work in 2000, it must have been one of the very first advisory groups to support the new devolved Scottish Parliament. So really it's had a very influential, high profile role over a number of years. And that group supported the production of 3 quite influential reports over the last 15 years. The first report was Creating Linguistic Access, and that was commissioned very shortly after the BSL Linguistic Access Group was set up. And that was a report that was that Mary Brennan was very involved with. It was undertaken by the training subgroup of the BSL Group, also involved Liz Scott Gibson and a number of others that I think that you will no doubt know. But that report said very clearly that deaf BSL users in Scotland and other deaf groups, because actually have a broader remit than just BSL, were unable to participate in and contribute to life in Scotland because of the many barriers that they faced. And it argued that a long-term, holistic, integrated solution was needed to overcome those barriers. So that was quite an influential report. That was followed in 2008 by a second report on behalf of that group. And that was called the Roadmap to Linguistic Access. And similarly, that found that there were many barriers that prevented deaf people in Scotland from participating. And it suggested a number of solutions. And the report was intended to be a resource for the government and for other public bodies to help them to make informed decisions and to make progress in overcoming the barriers that still stood in the way of many deaf people in Scotland. And then last but not least, in 2015, the group reviewed the roadmap. So that was during the time the bill was making its way through Parliament. And the reason was really to give us a bit of a head start to see what things had been achieved and what things still needed to be done. So that if the bill was passed, we would have some idea of what things we still needed to address as a matter of urgency. And that report, which is on SCOD's website, found that actually many of the solutions that had been recommended in the 2008 report had actually been delivered, at least in part, if not in full. So I think the story here is that we have made some big progress, but there is more to do. And certainly, the Minister who has responsibility for the BSL Act, Dr. Allen, was very struck when he was supporting the bill going through Parliament by the stories he heard from many BSL users about their day-to-day experience of life in Scotland and the marginalisation and the exclusion that they continue to face. And so we feel that the BSL Act really enables us to take the next step and to focus on the priority areas where there is still a lot more work to do. So that's the background, really. I'm going to turn now to talk about the Act itself. As I'm sure you know, the main purpose of the Act is to promote use and understanding of BSL across the public sector. What it actually requires is for public bodies to publish plans saying how they will promote and support BSL. So it'll be a little while until we know exactly what public bodies are going to do in response to the Act. But I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. First of all, I just wanted to set out some of the features of the Scottish Government's approach to this bill, because I think that helps to inform what I'm going to say about implementation. Firstly, it was never a question, our support was never in question. We never resisted the legislation, we embraced it from the start, and we were very clear from the moment that the the bill was published that we supported its principles. But we felt it could be improved. And so our work during the passage of the legislation was all about strengthening, actually, it wasn't watering down, it was strengthening the bill's provisions and making it more action orientated, so that it would actually make more of a difference to real people's lives. What we didn't want is for it to be a huge bureaucratic or administrative exercise, which is all about producing reports, plans and then reports. We wanted to make sure that the work involved in administering legislation was proportionate and that most of the time and resource was spent on implementing actions or doing things that would make a difference. So that was really where we were coming from. We took a collaborative approach, and I think if you follow the process of the bill, you'd see that it was very consensual all the way through. The committee, the Education and Culture Committee, which scrutinised the bill and is made up of MSPs from across all parties, voted unanimously in support of the bill at stage 1, voted unanimously in support of the government's amendments at stage 2, and then the whole Parliament voted unanimously to pass the bill at stage 3. And we were very fortunate, I think, that Mark Griffin, a Labour MSP, was very open to working with the government and very generous in allowing us to influence how the bill was shaped and in agreeing that what we now have, I think, is a better piece of legislation and better for deaf people than the bill that was originally published. And what was really important, I think, for the Parliament and for the government is the full involvement of the deaf community throughout the process. And I won't talk much about that because that's really what Lavra is going to focus on. But I think everybody really learned something from the BSL bill. The huge interest that there was through the Facebook group from many people who never responded to a government consultation or submitted evidence for a piece of legislation, never been to a committee, never been into the Parliament perhaps, because they were enabled to do so because the Parliament changed the way that it was doing business to make that possible. I think that really had a lasting impact on the Scottish Parliament, and I think it's had an impact on the wider public sector, because we've seen that it is possible to do things differently and better if we take the lead from the community. And it's led on to some interesting discussions in government, certainly, that we shouldn't talk about people as being hard to reach. I think in the past we've talked about BSL users as being hard to reach because they don't come forward to engage with government. But it's not BSL users that are hard to reach. I think what the BSL bill showed us is that it's us that's hard to reach. But by changing the way we do business, we can make it easier and more welcoming for people to participate, and that's what we want. So I think that the process of the bill has had a legacy actually beyond the BSL bill, and many of us have learned a lot from that. I'm going to talk a bit about the changes that we made to improve the Act. Just the main ones, really. Firstly, we suggested that rather than every public body producing their own BSL plan, we should have a single national plan which covered all national public bodies who were directly answerable to ministers. And this to us seemed a really sensible approach, because it makes it possible to have to be much more strategic and much more coordinated. It also reduces the number of plans being produced. So that's the point I was making earlier about reducing the amount of admin and allowing people to focus on action. That said, actually, the number of public bodies covered by the Act is bigger as a result of government amendments, because we've extended the number and range of organisations to be covered. But the overall number of plans being produced is reduced, because the national plan will cover about 50 public bodies. Now, we don't yet know what the national plan will say, because that will be determined by the National Advisory Group that I'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's likely that there will be some general actions for all public bodies, and that could be about accessibility of information and services for BSL users perhaps. But there will also be specific actions for specific organisations. So for example, if the national plan said something about BSL as part of the school curriculum, introducing BSL as a modern language alongside French and German, then it's likely there will be specific actions for the education agencies, such as Education Scotland or the Scottish Qualifications Authority. So I think it will be a mix of actions for everybody and specific actions which will relate to priorities that are in the plan. But we need to wait and see, because the content will be determined by that BSL National Advisory Group. Other changes we made were lengthening the reporting and review cycle. So the bill as published suggested roughly a 4-year cycle. The Gaelic Language Act has a 5-year cycle, and feedback from that is that that feels too short. Even 5 years feels too short, because actually, when you look at the timeline, there's just not enough time between a public body producing their plan and then having to report on progress. So we argued for a 6-year cycle, and that was accepted. And again, the point is to put the focus of resources on actions rather than administration and reporting. And lastly, we renamed the performance review the progress report, because we said we wanted to take a more supportive approach, and it's too early to measure performance because we don't have a baseline and we don't have performance indicators. So we could move to that over time, but for now we want to talk about the progress report. And there was another interesting angle here, which was that local government, local authorities really objected to having a performance review whereby they were answerable to Scottish ministers, because in terms of accountability, they're not actually answerable to Scottish ministers. They're answerable to their communities. So there's an important point in there about local accountability. And so their engagement with BSL users in their communities becomes really important. I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. We also drafted some other amendments, which were then offered to other MSPs to lodge. So the specific reference to tactile BSL, so this is for deaf-blind people who use BSL, was drafted by government, but it was offered to Dennis Robertson, who is a backbencher for the SNP, and also co-convener of the group on deafness. And then the two other amendments, one about the requirement to translate draft and final plans into BSL, which wasn't in the original bill. It would be daft not to require BSL plans to be translated into BSL. It wasn't in the original bill. And also ensuring that consultation on draft plans is fully accessible to deaf BSL users and to deaf-blind BSL users. Those two amendments were drafted by the government and offered to the member in charge, Mark Griffin, to lodge. So again, I think that demonstrates a consensual approach, which certainly helped ease the passage of the bill. So I'm going to talk briefly about implementation before I hand over to Apple. What I think is really important about that Act and about our approach to implementing it is that it deliberately shifts power into the deaf community. It's quite a different way of doing things. It will be the BSL National Advisory Group which will inform the development of the first BSL National Plan. And that group will be made up of just over half BSL representatives. So 20 places on the group and 11 will be BSL representatives. 10 of those will be deaf BSL users. The 11th place will go to a hearing parent of a deaf child whose first or preferred language is BSL. So there'll be 2 parents on the group, but we believe that one of them should be a hearing parent because they will have a different perspective to a deaf parent. So the balance, the majority of places just, is to BSL representatives. But the plan is that exactly half will be deaf BSL representatives. We've also made a commitment that there will be 2 places for young BSL users, and by that we mean under 18 or under 21 if they're within the care system. So that's a definition that's used in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there will also be 2 places that are reserved for deaf-blind BSL users. And we've had a lot of discussion about how to do that, because it's not enough just to reserve places on the National Advisory Group. It would be very difficult for children and young people and for deaf-blind people to participate in a group like that. It would be challenging for deaf BSL users to participate in a group like that. We have to be very careful, very mindful of how we run the group, because the other half will be public bodies who are subject to the Act, who may not be used to working with deaf BSL users. But we've taken advice, we've spoken to the Children's Commissioner, we've done a lot of work on this, and we've decided that the best way to ensure that young people and deaf-blind people can feed in effectively is to have a subgroup, if you like, one which is the young NAG and one which is the deaf-blind NAG. And those groups will meet outside of the main National Advisory Group. They will focus on issues that are of most interest to them. And they will each represent 2 people from their group who will represent their views on the main NAG. So we think that that's a good way of doing it. So the process that I'm going to talk about in a minute is about recruiting deaf BSL users to the NAG. There will be a separate process for young people and for deaf-blind people. Really, the approach we've taken is to ensure that we're supporting people to participate and make a meaningful contribution, and enabling them to do that, and that it's not just tokenistic. It's really important that the BSL representatives on the NAG are able to represent a wider set of views, not just their own experience. And that's partly about the skill of the individual and the perspective of the individual. But it's also ensuring that they are connected with the much wider discussion that will be taking place outside of the NAG meeting with the BSL community. Because it's not just those people around the table that will influence what goes into the national plan. It's everybody who wants to get involved in the conversation and contribute those views, their views. And it will be our job in the Deaf Sector Partnership, that I'll talk about in a minute, to make sure that those conversations happen, make sure that the views of the wide range and the diverse BSL community are captured, and that the 5 deaf BSL representatives are able and supported to reflect those views on the NAG, alongside the young people and alongside the deaf-blind people. So I talked about the diversity of the BSL community. We're really hoping to attract a wide range of people to put themselves forward for the NAG. And we're hoping that there will be a diverse range of people that we can select, because the community is diverse, and support will be provided to those individuals through the process inquiry, and for those who are successful throughout their time on the group to ensure that they can participate properly. I think I've already said the rest of the places on the NAG will be public bodies who are subject to the Act. It will be co-chaired by a Scottish Government official and a deaf BSL user, and I think that's an important principle. That's something that we've been doing for quite a long time in the disability world, which is the other part of my job, and I think demonstrates a commitment to a more equal way of working. So, as of course you know, the NAG will be tasked with the job of developing the first national plan. So that's the deaf BSL users, and parents, and the public bodies. And while it's really important that the plan reflects the priorities of the deaf community, so I can't tell you what's going to be in it, because that will be preempting the process. It will be a balance between the wishes of the deaf community and what the public bodies feel is deliverable. We have to be realistic here. This cannot just be a wish list. The national plan will set out actions that will be taken by public bodies in the first cycle. So actually the national plan will just talk about the national public bodies, but as you're probably aware, listed authorities, so that includes local authorities and local health boards and a few others, will need to produce their own plans a year after the national plan, but it will need to mirror closely what's in the national plan. So the national plan will influence local plans as well. Just to finish off about the NAG, we are literally finalising the detail right now. We expect to advertise the NAG and how to apply next week. It's a competitive process. Interviews will be, there'll be an interview panel. People will also be required to submit an application either in BSL or in written English. In fact, the whole process will be fully accessible in BSL and in English. What we're going to do for the deaf BSL users is invite them to submit a filmed application in BSL. We will need a written application as well, because not everybody on the panel will be a BSL user. But it will be for the applicant to decide whether they provide a written application or whether we have their application translated. And if somebody needs to commission an interpreter to translate their application into written English, then we would obviously so we're giving people choice as far as possible. There will be an interview panel with 4 people on it, 2 representatives from the Deaf Sector Partnership, an independent chair who is a BSL user but not deaf, and then an independent person from the Scottish Government's Public Appointments team to help ensure that the process is absolutely fair and robust. Applicants will be expected to be on the group for 2 years until the first national plan is published, and then we'll review the group and what's needed after that. Obviously, we need to look at what technical advice we need to deliver priorities in the national plan, but I think it would be premature to do that until we have the national plan and we know what the priorities are. But not everything has to wait for the national plan. There are many things that are being progressed by many organisations that don't need to stop until the national plan is in place. For example, I know that Rachel and colleagues are, still working away on issues around qualifications for teachers of the deaf. I know that Graham's, working away on getting BSL into schools for Northern Language. Many other examples. These things can continue to progress. It's not a case of stopping everything until we have the national plan, but obviously when we have the national plan, that may reset the agenda a bit. So I've talked about implementation in the first 2 years, which takes us up to the national plan. After that, we'll review the NAG, listed authorities will have to publish their plans, there will be a national progress report, and then the cycle repeats itself every 6 years. Just conscious of using up too much time now for me to speed up. We are very conscious that things don't magically change overnight because we have a piece of legislation, and that if it is going to make a real difference to people's lives, we need to support implementation. So we've created the Deaf Sector Partnership, which is made up of 6 delivery partners and the Scottish Government and Voluntary Action Fund, and that has 2 main functions. Firstly, and most importantly, to support direct engagement between BSL users and public bodies. Because while some public bodies do have that relationship, do talk to BSL users about how they can improve their services, I think most don't and need to have that. Partly because of their accountability that I talked about. They're accountable to their local communities, they need to be talking to their local communities. And some of them aren't doing that and need help to do that. So that's the most important function. And secondly, to help public bodies to be better on BSL, essentially, to help them to improve. The approach we're taking is around continuous improvement, supporting continuous improvement, and the Deaf Sector Partnership will help us do that. Adil's going to talk more about that. Just finishing off, it's really important, I think, that the BSL bill, the work with ACT, the work we're doing around BSL isn't seen as being in isolation, disconnected with anything else. We need to ensure that people understand that it's about ensuring participation of our deaf citizens, and that links with the government's ambitions around creating a fairer Scotland, around encouraging participation, democratic renewal, all kinds of things. So we would argue that actually equality generally, but in this case the BSL users, is essential to everything the government is trying to achieve. Our approach, I think, is to try and gain some consistency across all the public sector in Scotland. We're recognising that there needs to be some local tweaking, and so that what's delivered locally through plans, through this process, meets the needs of local BSL users. As I've already said, legislation isn't a magic wand, and we can all play a part in supporting public bodies to deliver, to implement the legislation in the best way possible. But we have to be realistic about financial pressures. We have to be smart about how we do this. I do not expect to have a big pot of money to implement the legislation. I just don't think that's realistic in this climate. But moving towards, as we've been talking about, the importance of engagement with BSL users is absolutely crucial to the success of the legislation. And the importance of those of you who work with deaf BSL users, whether that's as interpreters or training interpreters, or many other roles that other organisations have. There's plenty of work to go around, and there's something for everyone to do here to support implementation. And lastly, I just want to emphasise the significance of the legislation in shifting power into the deaf community. This is a really different way of doing business. It's one which we welcome. It has its challenges, but we're working closely with the deaf sector to try to achieve this. So I'm going to hand over to Avril, who's going to talk about that act from the BSL community's perspective, and talk a bit more about the BDA's role as part of the deaf sector partnership in supporting implementation. Okay.
Hello everyone, good evening. Nice to see some familiar faces, and hello to everyone on Facebook who's joining us on the live stream. So thank you, Hilary, for that first part, and thanks to Ensign Lectures for the invitation to speak here tonight. Hilary and I have been working together a lot on the BSL Act and been involved in BSL for a long time. It's great to see the Act finally passed. I'm sure some of you were there in the gallery that day and how emotional it was, and to see that unanimous vote by MSPs. Proud to be a Scottish person as well that we now have this Act. So I'm going to talk more about, as I was invited by the say, well, what's next? So Hilary's talked about what the Act involves, what the next stages are for implementation, and so I'm going to talk about how that relates to the community. So it's not now that all the Act's passed, we're done. The job didn't stop on the 17th of September. There's a lot more work to do. It's not, there's now not time to rest on laurels. Now we have the action, we have the Act in place, and that's set the tone for how we can work and continue. So it's our hands off and straight into something. There's a plan to develop, there's going to be effort coming out for that soon. So when we look at the BSL Act, I already mentioned about the promotion of ESL is one of the first ones that come to mind. And that can mean a lot of different things. You know, that can be making ESL more accessible, ESL more visible, perhaps within schools, and to improve access to services and also inclusion for the deaf community. It means that deaf people can have their language recognised and have more access to services. You know, and you'll see that tagline at the bottom of my slides there, that the British Deaf Association stands for deaf equality. And the Act has that, we need more equality. BDA is also concerned with access and freedom of choice. So that freedom of choice relates to your language choice, that you don't have to use English, you're able to use ESL. So I feel that the Act really accurately represents BDA's vision in this. So as you'll see on the slides, the 4 key areas there. I don't know if you can see them on the live stream. But within the Act, there's 4 key areas for success. The first one being community engagement. And I think if you look at the perspective of the deaf community, you know, it's about working with the Scottish Government on that piece. And that community engagement has been huge. Without that involvement of the deaf community, the Act would never have passed. It would have probably gone on, there would have been delays. I think that the engagement with the community shows. And then the second point of collaborations and partnerships, I think it also is very important to us. It's not just about the usual suspects, but people who are interested, other organisations, universities. There's been many more allies we've had in the implementation of the Act. So partnerships have been key with other people who may be able to influence, and having that support to move forward. We couldn't have done this on our own, we needed that support from other people. You know, and BDA at the start was involved. It was really Scott and Lily Lawson, who was director at the time, you know, wanted BDA to work with Scott in developing this ESL bill. You know, and ESL was absolutely one of our visions to have that recognised. Rachel O'Neill was also involved in the subgroups and changed ideas as well. So there's been a lot of people involved over the years, Edinburgh University, many other deaf organisations. I'll talk more about that. So it's never just been BDA on its own, it's always been strong collaborative approach, and the empowerment of the deaf community, the folk culture. As Hilary said, you know, it's not just about rhetoric, and it's not just about us speaking for deaf people, but that real empowerment of the deaf community to be involved in the political process. You know, as organisations, we wanted to be able to step back and let the deaf community have their voices heard. Even as before, you've maybe seen that there's been marches, there were protests. It's almost like we didn't need to have that. We were still able to achieve these things without all of that. And the Education and Culture Committee at stage 2 were fantastic. We had unanimous support. You know, Hilary Lane from the Scottish Government was involved. We had full support from her department and from herself as well. So from planning and changes until it was finally passed, there's been collaboration and it's been allowed the deaf community to have their say. So that's really that important. Facebook, as everyone is seeing, you know, that wasn't just from us, that was the deaf community. You know, that, so, you know, I've got an image there of, you know, calls there. I think that we needed all of these parts to work together to make sure that everything was moving. So the success, I think, really is owed to these 4 key points. I already mentioned about the use of the Scottish Government setting up a Facebook page for people to make contributions. What an experience that was. It was amazing that the government did that. And that really opened the door for deaf people to have their say. You know, and I think it's a, you know, we talk about the deaf wave, it was like a sea of deaf people who contributed to this consultation that hasn't been seen before. You know, it really was, you know, a wave of deaf people, and the contributions that came in on that Facebook post, and posts, you know, constant. And so many people contributed in the ESL, and I think that really showed the strength of that empowerment and how deaf people were able to be involved and did contribute. You know, it wasn't organisations saying deaf people are saying this, it was deaf people themselves saying that on Facebook. You know, and that was really powerful. That first group had almost, you know, over 2,500 members. And you'll be aware though that that first group for the bill, because the bill became an act and, you know, the legislation was passed, you know, that Facebook group was only related to the bill. So the contribution page wasn't needed, that page was closed down. But the Scottish Government and Hillary really did recognise the need for this. And said we should continue Facebook. It's really important. Look how successful that's been and how engaged people have been. So that's when we were asked, and as part of the Deaf Sector Partnership, the DSP, we were asked to take responsibility for the administration of a new Facebook group. And as of October the 1st, we had over 1,500 members. So again, that importance of collaboration and working with the community, that people can have their views heard. Once we get the set up of the NAG, I think that rate is going to be even higher, and that's a great thing. It's an exciting thing. It will be challenging. We'll see how we swim through that, but that's really exciting time. In that short time, I think that was like 2 or 3 months, it's over 1,500 members. So I'm sure the numbers will surpass that first group, over 2,500. I hope if you're not members that you will join the Facebook group. Obviously, the old bill page is still there. You can't post comments anymore because the Scottish Government and Parliament don't administer that anymore. But it is there as an archive, so that people maybe when they're creating the national plan, the national advisory group could go back to that as a resource and say, okay, let's look at issues of health that people brought up. So it will become almost like a library and a resource that people can run an archive that could be afforded from that to use. So I think onboard with Facebook group is an exciting time, but the deaf community are saying, well, what happens next? Can you still contribute? And you absolutely can still contribute. But we will be talking about the Act and plans. We don't want that Facebook group to get derailed to talk about other issues. The government is still involved in keeping an eye on what that Facebook group is. So it's focused on the Act as a topic. I'll talk a little bit more about the DSP, just to clarify that. People maybe started to speak about that. So we just returned to Facebook for a moment. The Facebook group, some of you may have seen perhaps this week, last week, there's been a lot more uploads and video information explaining what the Scottish Government is, what the Parliament is. There's been a lot of information going out through the videos. For example, people say, well, there's a Scottish Parliament, there's a government, it's the same, isn't it? Does it ask the Parliament or ask the government? So we wanted to clarify that there are 3 administrators of this Facebook group, and there's ESL videos being uploaded, and there'll be even more in the next few weeks about what the NAG is, what that's involved, what's the difference between the Parliament and the government. And Lillian Lawson was involved in filming today, so Lillian is one of our administrators. We have Lillian Lawson, we have Linda Richards as well, and Jim Cohen, James Cohen as well. So that's the 3 administrators who are involved and responsible for the Facebook group and ensuring information is out. So it's overseen really by the DD. We check content and ministers and overall. So it's been working really well so far. So then there's the Deaf Sector Partnership. You'll see the initial DSP for short. That group is funded by the Scottish Government. There are 6 organisations involved in the DSP. And they focus on one particular area. So, BDA Scotland, does have other projects, but this specific funding is to focus on the DSL Act. And other organisations will have their own areas to look at and their own responsibilities. So it's like a jigsaw, we're all of the pieces to contribute and implement that. So it means that information will still be disseminated to the community, and the government still is responsible for making sure that that's being sent out. The 6 organisation names are here on the slide, you can see that. Someone's asked me what BAF is, and I'll explain that. That's an organisation people are working on that. So there's BDA Scotland, SCOD, Deaf Action, Deaf Connections, Deaf Line Scotland, NDCS Scotland, and there's so that's the deaf organisation, but there's also Scottish Government, as Helen said she's involved, and BAF is the Voluntary Action Fund. They work with partners of the government and related to funding. So we've had the Deaf Sector Partnership has had this funding, and BAF is like the middleman between the Scottish Government and the Deaf Sector Partnership. So they make sure that funding is being administered properly and it's being used for what it's looking for. So that's why we're involved. So it's the 8 organisations involved in that. You see this logo here, that square box, that Deaf Sector Partnership, and you can see that here on the website. DSP means these 8 organisations. And I'd just like to explain what that means for DSP does. So that you wonder what that group is saying. So I can talk about BDA Scotland's role initially. First of all, we oversee the administration of that Facebook group, as I said. The Scottish Government felt that because BDA is deaf-led, the voice of the sign language using community, that we would be the main people to administer that Facebook ESL group. So that's one of our goals. And also, BDA Scotland is involved in the National Advisory Group in that. We'll be involved in support and encouraging deaf people to apply for positions on the National Advisory Group. So promoting any recruitment for that, so that people are aware of what the recruitment process is, doing translations of information into ESL, make sure that information is then sent out to the deaf community. So much more of an information sharing role in Scotland. And as Hilary mentioned, there's the local authorities, the authorities who have to, some of them maybe have signed up to a BSL charter that BDA has. So that we then have a BDA Scotland charter, which is more specifically tailored towards the Act. So again, that's encouraging local authorities to sign up to a charter, make pledges to promote and encourage the use of BSL. So there's other small things, but that's our main responsibilities. Deaf Connections, their role within the Deaf Sector Partnership, they have different membership groups, they have the OAP group, they have other minorities, the Asian Network. That's not something that we would replicate. Where Deaf Connections are already filling that gap, that's something that we would work with them on. So they're able to consult with their different user groups and feed that into the Deaf Sector Partnership. So it's not about replicating that, it's about looking at what deaf organisations cover what, and each of us feeding in our own way to the Deaf Sector Partnership. So that biodiversity of the deaf communities there, whether that's ethnic minorities, LGBT communities, or others. They're also involved of developing the education policy for public bodies to see that deaf people are far more involved, so they'll be responsible for that and sharing that information. Deafblind Scotland, we have a very clear remit for deafblind ESL users, but they also support other organisations with their own deafblind policy, giving general advice and expertise, how to tailor our communication and make sure that our information is accessible to deafblind people. So that's really their main remit. They also work with public bodies to ensure that they have awareness and knowledge around deaf blindness. Deaf Action are also involved in this and their responsibilities really are to provide ESL awareness to the public bodies and authorities, so that means things like training information. So they provide training, but not just deaf awareness, it also be deafblind awareness. Working with Deafblind Scotland to have a package tailored to promote that, raise awareness within public bodies. They're responsible for that. And they're also responsible for work with young deaf people, youth participation. Hilary mentioned within the NAG was the subgroup of the youth NAG, and they're our future generations, so we want to have them involved and have them fully able to participate in the next cycle, in the next section. Deaf Action responsible for that. SCOD, Scottish Council of Deafness, are the kind of overall conveners of the Deaf Sector Partnership. They provide overall monitoring, they create the reports, so the organisations will make the contributions, and SCOD really is the overseer who would evaluate contributions and work with all the partners. It really is on an equal basis that all the organisations work together, even though we're overseen by SCOD. They're more responsible for, they're really like a secretary of the group. So they'll do the administration of booking meetings and organisations. So you can see how all the different organisations within the DSP contribute to this. I should say as well, SCOD also work quite closely with the public bodies and the Scottish Government in terms of consultations and representing the DSP. So they're able to signpost quite often if needed, looking for training directly to Deaf Action or others. NDCS, obviously the National Deaf Children's Society, with the children's early years, but also parents of deaf children, is As Hilary said, there's going to be a place for a hearing payment of a deaf child and a deaf payment of deaf children. So also the parental experience to have that made. Obviously, if you're a deaf person who's now an adult, it's like having a parent made to speak for their deaf children. So that everybody is represented within the NAN in the needs. So no group business for it. So again, that signposting and sharing of information is vital within the DSP to support and details work. So Hilary's already explained a lot about the Act. So I just wanted to reiterate, what we see as the three pillars of the Act. These three foundations of the support the Act. First of all, will be the ESL National Plan. Then the authorities plan, so the councils, local authorities, and mentioned that that national plan will influence the local authorities plans that are made and will be tweaked at local level. So that would be for places like the NHS and the Justice Department, the police, would all be responsible under these authorities plans. And there'll also be progress reports where the progress will be reviewed. And it's not about pointing finger, it's not about naming and shaming people, but saying, okay, here's what you're doing well, and here's how we can support you to improve these other areas that are not doing so well. Because people don't, we need to give people solutions rather than saying we're doing things wrong. So the progress reports will not be about supporting perhaps weaker areas where people may be struggling within the plans. And I think we're all responsible for that, whatever areas we're to support that. So I think the metaphor of a filing cabinet is quite important. If you think about each of these represent a drawer, but within those files might be health, police, courts, within one drawer of the national plan could have many different files within that. The authorities plan drawer, as it were, will have lots of different councils involved in that, different files. And the progress reports will have over the 6 years all those files. We want to lock that so we have those main pillars. So we've talked about how deaf people can be involved. Obviously, they can become members of the National Advisory Group. They can join the Facebook group. You can all get involved in that, become a member and contribute to the Facebook group. And give own ideas and views. Also, different local authorities will be holding consultations. So there may be focus groups, open meetings that will be open to deaf people. No doubt you'll see these within your own communities in the future. And you go to a local group, perhaps in Edinburgh, and still get involved on a local level. So that's very much what we expect to see the councils having open meetings and consultations that you can attend and contribute to. So deaf people, deaf-blind people with their platform too. So I know there's a lot of people who maybe don't like to use Facebook, and so Facebook is not only way you can communicate, they will be able to contribute face-to-face or in their own preferred communication method. So I want people, it's not just Facebook. If you want to send in a video, send a letter, and the process will be very open and transparent for people to contribute. And just to quote from that, that Hilary said, we don't want to treat ESL users as being hard to reach. I think Scotland can be very rural, and we have a lot of islands, so we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible. We want deaf ESL users to be easy to reach and for the government to be easy to communicate with. PDA also has outreach workers who will work with the community, because it's impossible for that one person to speak to every deaf person in Scotland. So we'll speak to the local contacts who maybe represent Deaf Club or deaf groups, so that they really have that rich information straight from the deaf communities. And as I said, I think the community engagement, collaborations, partnership and empowerment doesn't stop here at the ongoing process. Now, I don't want you to put all these dates in the diary, I don't write them down. This is just a very rough plan, and I can tell you there's already an error on it. So you can put down your magnifying glasses right now, I'll just tell you about that. This is a rough plan for what the National Advisory Group will look like. The announcements will be out before Christmas, as Hilary said. They'll be shortlisted, interviews will be in February, and it will be recruited in March, and then the plan for the first few meetings anyway. There may need additional meetings, and the Scottish Government does have general plans. So if you're saying what's happening next, this is what's happening. A couple of times the dates there in the wrong order, you'll see. But by the end of October 2017, the national plan will be published in ESL and English. So So that is the plan, that's the aim. But it's like, you know, when you're planning for an exam, it's all that preparation beforehand. So we're working back from that publication date of October 2017. So for the BSL community, October 2017 is our big exam that we try to plan for. And this is what it would look like. So there'll be consultations beforehand, that will be launched with the translations from BSL, and then amendments made, brought back to the NAG for discussion, and then disseminated. So there will be a full consultation, ongoing dialogue for this. It's not going to be a one-off thing. There'll be updates, I'm sure, on Facebook. There'll be emails, so it can be done through open meetings. Some of you, I think, came to a January meeting. Remember the PDA squad set up in January? I think it was January 2015 in Glasgow. Remember that big open meeting with a lot of people? So I expect to see more of them before that final plan is published. And we will be quite creative and collaborate with the community. So my last slide here, really I just want to say that we are one community and we have one goal. You know, if we stay focused on that, is that it is the BSL Act. Our hearts are there for the community and for BSL. So it's like we're on a road, and it's not a motorway, I can tell you that. It's a main road. It's one way. We're all in it together. Whether you're a coach, you're a car, we're all there. You're not able to overtake or jump ahead. We're all in the same road, both short term, medium term, and long term plans. So at the moment, we're in first gear. Right? We'll maybe move up to second, third, fourth gear as our middle plans, and we get to fifth gear, that's our long term plans. Okay? Maybe we'll even get to hit cruise control and just coast along, maybe. So that's the road we're on as a community to try and achieve that for October 2017. That's our journey, that's where we're going. It's a very exciting time. You know, you're looking forward to 2016 with the national plans, and 2017, that's the date you're coming down. You'll have the national plan by then. So we want to continue that involvement. You know, the Facebook groups are open, there'll be meetings, there'll be discussions. The more engagement, the better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Avril and Hilary, and I think we'll carry on live streaming. We don't normally, but I think this is a really important time to get tweets and things coming in for questions as well. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, so should we have about 5 minutes break now to go to the toilet, etc., and then come back to the questions? It was really, really interesting presentation. I'm sure lots of people are thinking of questions right now.
Stacey, the problem with connecting to the cloud, I think. It still says it's broadcasting though, so that's good. It's just
Yeah, I think you share the
Stacey.
Okay then. Is everyone ready now? We're going to take questions. We're still live streaming, so we're really happy to accept tweets if you are. Can I just check who's monitoring the exciting tweets at the moment? So can you get any questions in? Right. Okay, who would like to come out first? You have to come out, by the way. You must have lots of questions. It's a very momentous time. Let's go forward.
campaign has been going for a long time. We now have an act, and this really is the opportunity for the deaf community to get involved. So my question really is related to, also deaf people can apply. Can you tell us more about the criteria for an application to be a member of an act? Just to make sure that people are actually involved and it will involve members of the deaf community. It's not just someone who can sort of, there is someone who's engaged with the deaf community or who's involved. For example, do they have to live in Scotland? So can you tell us more about the criteria to be involved in that?
Okay, is that working? Is that okay? I haven't got the papers with me, so I maybe won't be able to cover everything. A couple of points though. I think it's really important to emphasise that you don't need to have formal experience of being on an advisory group, or you don't need to have had a high-level job to get onto the NAG, because people's life experiences are relevant for this job, but you would need to be able to show that you're able to work in a group, you're able to represent the views of others and not just speak about your own experience. You're able to sort of negotiate and be pragmatic. Those kinds of skills count as well. But we wanted to make it possible, although it has to be a robust process because it's an important group, it needs to be possible for a young person with no formal experience of work or being in the group to be successful. So it's quite broad, I think, and people can bring examples of experience from their own everyday lives, or from being part of the deaf club, or from doing some work in their community. So you'll see more when we post the application next week. People do have to be living in Scotland to apply. They have to be over 18 or 18 or over to apply in this process. Under 18 is going through the separate YLAB process. There's a whole section about skills and experience that will be published next week. But in terms of eligibility, yes, you must be living in Scotland. If you were employed by any of the organisations of the Deaf Sector Partnership, you can't apply, because I think it's really important that the process is seen as being absolutely fair and transparent, and that there are no conflicts of interest. But I think when we publish the criteria and the sort of specification, people will be able to see what we're looking for. Do you explain anything else about the skills and experience?
As you said, Hilary, I think what's important and what I'd like to reinforce is that anybody who's already in the DSP, like for example, I work for the BDA, I can't apply to be in the NAG because I've already been involved in this process, so it means that I'm not eligible to apply to be in the NAG. So anyone who works for any of those 6 organisations is not allowed to apply for the position on the National Advisory Group. And that's because we want to encourage members of the deaf community out there. And there's plenty of those people, they want new faces, old faces, we want to have that open as a process. They must be a BSL user and a fluent BSL user who's involved in the deaf community and is aware of the issues that deaf people face every day, and will be continue to involve in the deaf community for the duration of that National Advisory Group. We don't want people who apply with their own personal agenda. So we don't want people who are applying because they're interested in furthering their own business. And it just reinforces what you said, Hilary, is again, people who are here, to represent the views of other deaf community members, who are there to speak for them. You see more about the skills. We want people to have knowledge and awareness of the deaf people comfortable way of life. You know, we want you to live and breathe in the community. You know, so that's the members who we want. So not just someone who's deaf but who is in the deaf community. How can they represent deaf community views within that group? So that's the type of thing that we tested that interview to make sure that process is clear.
I think just to add to that, it is important that the deaf BSL users are part of the community. It's a two-way process because they will need to reflect the views of the community, but they'll also need to be helping to inform the community about what the NAG is doing and what the priorities are. But we won't expect those individuals to do that all by themselves. The work of the Deaf Sector Partnership is about making those conversations happen, and we will give the representatives the information they need to represent the views. So we're not expecting them to spend all of their time going around Scotland and finding out what people want. You know, the Deaf Sector Partnership will do that work, and they will make sure that the people who are on who are representing those views on the NAG are really clear about what the views are of the community, what the priorities are, and you know, what it is that they're representing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give another example, you said, you know, maybe someone who's grown up in the deaf community who uses BSL and they say, oh, I'm the fifth generation of deaf BSL. That's not really the point. You know, the point is that you have a good rapport with the community, you're involved in the community, and your skills as a person, you know how to engage with government ministers, to be able to sit down and have that, you know, informed discussion. So it is a holistic approach to that. So again, it's not just having information from NAG and keeping that to yourself, but someone who can share that information. So members of that National Advisory Group have to go back to the community and share that. So does that answer your question, Elaine?
I think just one more thing to add. I think these people will become ambassadors or champions for the BSL community, but they don't have to be champions and ambassadors when they apply. I think there'll be support and training and development throughout, so they will grow into that role. They don't already have to be leading life in the community to apply.
Thank you for that clarification. Just another follow-up quick question. So people have to live in Scotland, but will there be a time limit? Because it might be people who are interested and people might move to Scotland and apply for a position. So how long should they have lived in Scotland for?
We talked about that, and we decided it just has to be living in Scotland when you apply and for the duration of your time in the degree. Otherwise, it's just too complicated. It's just too difficult to say, you know, you have to be here a certain length of time. You have to draw a line somewhere, and we felt it was simpler just to say you have to be living in Scotland when you apply. And if you move away from Scotland, you would have to withdraw from it.
I'd like to ask you both, you'll be aware that you see a lot of deaf clubs within the deaf community are closing. So will the National Advisory Group look at people from different areas of Scotland? I mean, what if you have a lot of people from the same area? Is that something you look at? Are we able to have an informal chat with the panel to be able to ask these questions? Will that be okay? Or can we really talk about that? How to apply? Is that informal discussion?
Well, that's the first bit. We would like to get a spread in terms of where people live, what kind of areas they live in, you know, but also age, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic group. I think, you know, that would be ideal, but the first criteria will be about the person's skills and what they bring to the group. But clearly, if everybody came from the cities, we would be missing something. So we want to try to get a spread. And there will be, you can get information and support if you want to apply for that.
Yes, obviously geographically, we would like to have that spread, so we have representation from all over Scotland. But we're looking for the right person, and the person has the skills to provide in that gap. So, if they're able to feed into policy. Of course, we would like to see representatives from the islands, somebody from the islands, and someone from rural Scotland, whether that's north or south, we would love to see that. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know. We don't know if there's going to be applicants for that. So, there is the opportunity for people to ask. You mentioned there also about an informal opportunity. All this information will be translated into ESL, and there will be the 6 organisations available, I should say 6 members of the Deaf Sectors Partnership. So you can think, I want to ask them, speak to whoever, I know that person from there, and can ask them more relevant information. So there will be other contacts available if you wanted to have an informal chat to say, what's the criteria for to apply? That opportunity is available. It's not that you must do a formal application to have any information. They won't fill out your application for you, but you can have an informal chat about it. One question at the back, yeah. You mentioned about the young man, the youth minute, that will be a separate group, and will they have their own selection process? And what's the criteria for that? Because obviously young people, I think, as you mentioned, you want people who use ESL as their first or preferred language, and we all know that young people have very different ESL use because they don't have access to ESL. So what's the criteria for that young man?
So for the young mag, we're talking about 10 to 17, 10 to 20, if they've been in care. The criteria will be similar but adapted by Deaf Action and NDCS who are working together on that. But the main difference is that what they will be doing first is to encourage a range of young people to come together to form a group. And then from there, that group of young people will nominate their 2 representatives. We'll be able to give more information about that next week, about how that's going to work. That's very much in the hands of those 2 organisations that will be focusing most on young people.
I think the point that was critical, we see there's a growing number of young people who maybe aren't able to use ESL because of their school situation and availability of ESL for them. So I think people like us, yourself, we all have this opportunity that we now know there's going to be a young group, and to encourage young deaf people to apply. So I think other organisations, not just NDCS and Deaf Action, who will be able to identify perhaps young people, but we're looking for the potential of young people to go in. As Hilary says, they don't have to be users at the moment, but that's something we're looking to grow with people. So I know it's not easy to find ESL users, and I know there are people out there, who have fluent ESL skills who are younger, or they may have the skills but don't have the fluency in ESL. So it's not going to be an easy process. There will be assessments, but I hope we do have enough participants to come forward.
I don't actually know the answer to the specific point. I think it's a specific point about what level of proficiency of BSL does that young person have to have. No.
But
That's an issue.
that must be a criteria.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if they have no knowledge of sign language, as we mentioned about, we have the hearing parent of deaf child, there's a place in the NAG for that. Now that must be someone who has a child or children who use ESL, and it could be that the parents themselves, even though they're a hearing parent, they may have level 1 or level 2, or even if they have that interest in it. But we don't want someone who objects to sign language, who's then on the National Advisory Group for the ESL Act. We want people who are positive and encouraged by the use of ESL. So same with the youth group, it could be someone who does use speech, but we don't want anyone who actively objects to the use of ESL. So you probably have the knowledge of people, please spread the word and let people know and encourage them to apply for this sort of thing. And then end up, if we have enough people who apply, we'll be able to interview and get the right recruitment. this long winding road that we're on. You know, this road is not the Fort Road Bridge we're talking about. This road is not was. I'm just thinking about, it's interesting you mentioned earlier, obviously the aim is to recruit this group of men and people, and one will maybe be a coder, as you said. What about, within the young group, again, will there be, a coder there, or someone who, do they all have to be deaf? Or could it be maybe someone, coder involved there? Well, like you say, we're going to have a parent of a deaf child in place. Maybe that we've got the deaf parents, their hearing, and then their child has become deaf. It could be that that hearing parent may have deaf parents themselves. That would be interesting. That person could be. Whether that child is a coder as well. I mean, that's maybe something we need to look at. Whether that's a child of deaf adults as well. It had been raised, and maybe that's something we need to look at. It's a new idea. I think whether we accept coders or not, even if it's a hearing person. Because I think now we've seen more coders. Of course, the aim is to have deaf children involved. We want deaf children involved first. And if there's no deaf children, okay, that's another issue, and that would be secondary. But our aim is to have deaf participants come forward.
I think that you've raised some really interesting points there about the young man and about their level of BSL and the opportunity to develop that, and also about coder in that group. I think, as Adam says, it's really important that the BSL representatives on the main group are deaf and not just people who've learned BSL. And I think that's quite important. I think we wouldn't like it probably if we said that to be anyone who's got a certain level of BSL. I think it's important that it's deaf culture as well as BSL as a language. But there could be something really valuable about having a child who's been brought up bilingual because they have deaf parents in the children's school. I have a strong view about that, but we can raise that with Deaf Action and then discuss it.
I mean, that's maybe a contribution to make Facebook, that could be another specific group that could feed into that, another subgroup. As we are still members of the sign language community. Again, go back to skills and criteria. And first of all, they have to have the language, and they have to have the culture, belong to deaf culture, and awareness of the community. And if you don't have those three things, then you don't meet those essential skills and knowledge requirements that the criteria sets out. If you have all three of those, if you live and breathe in the deaf community, if you wake up in the deaf community, you go to work, you're involved in the deaf community, you go home, you're involved in the deaf community, that's the perfect person that we're looking for, someone who's involved. Whether that's a child who has deaf parents, who friends, but they maybe go to a deaf youth club and they're not here, deaf school, there are people out there. We just want to encourage them to apply and get them to come forward. Just to go back to the planning stage, I can say I'm really proud to be Scottish and to have this act passed in Scotland. My question is, we're talking about rural areas. We have Shetland, Orkney, the Highlands, to try and encourage people from there. If people do live remotely, will transport costs be covered? Will it be side covered?
So the answer is that people's costs for attending the meeting will be covered. So travel and accommodation if necessary costs, and reasonable subsistence with meals during that time. But people will not be paid for their time to be on the group. And I know that people have asked about this in the past, and there will be some strong views about this. It's just not where we are at the moment. I appreciate that means the group that I've described as operating in an equal way isn't really equal, because the people who are sitting around the table from public bodies will be there in work time and will be paid, many of them will be on good salaries, because we would like to have very senior people there. So I accept that does seem on the face of it unfair. I mean, Avril and I have talked in the past about moving to a position in the future where we do recruit people into paid roles and that they sit on the group. But at the moment, I don't think that that would be the right approach for right now. But I appreciate that people may feel that that is very unfair. But people won't be out of pocket by being on the group.
I can remember a long time ago, we had the Deaf Forum in Edinburgh and Glasgow and other areas, and those have all disappeared really. And because local authority cuts, and it was really difficult to speak to people across it. So, there was the forum, and now we see the BSL Act, and I think this really gives deaf people a chance. So I wonder whether they would like to see the Deaf Forum so be established again to be able to work together, and maybe support the Scottish Government and councils again. Just a thought. You might remember Helen said earlier that we don't have to wait for the Act, and we don't have to wait for this plan to start going. We can go on with things now. And there's nothing to stop forums happening. Okay, the plan is going to be published in 2017. We don't have to wait for that at all. People can make a move then. But remember, you can't just say, well, we've got the Act and here it is, because it's not at that stage yet. Where we're able to complain and use the Act as a tool to be people with. The forums, though, could happen because the public bodies have to communicate with deaf people, and they have to consult with deaf BSL users. And one way they do that is maybe through a deaf forum. So there's absolutely nothing to stop people setting up deaf forums. There's a potential for that to happen. What do you think?
I think that's a really big point, because there will be a real demand for having that conversation with the deaf community from all these public bodies. So every local authority and every regional health board and some others, but they're the most important ones. They will need to, they are required to have conversations with the deaf communities in their area. So my advice to you would be, be ready for it. Get your act together if you can, so that you're in a good place to support them in only 3 years' time. They need to publish their plans in 3 years' time. We'll be concentrating more on the national plan for the next year and a half. But after that, we'll be looking to support those local authorities and health boards. But if you could make a start in your area of getting together and starting to talk to people, following what's going on, I think that would be really brilliant. And also, in local groups, you can use the Deaf Sector Partnership to help you to sort of form on and to develop, so that you're in a really good position when the local authority wants to talk to you. It will be an open door, and you'll be much more effective if you're ready and able to work with them. So I think that's a really good idea.
My point really relates to that last one. So say people do want to set something up and get involved. Before, when I was involved in the forum, I used to always ask the BDA for support. So is that the kind of thing that BDA would still support, or should I go to the Deaf Sector Partnership? Because I'm now thinking about, I want to set up a support forum, but then where do I get that support and guidance from? This is something that we've had discussions about, for when deaf people feel, I want to move on and do something, what do I do? They need that support. At the moment, the advertisement's about to work for the NAG. Within the next year, we've talked about the deaf organisations providing perhaps a kind of one-day training for people. Because you're right, the BDA already has, the visible, how to set up capabilities, and that's from a while ago. It's a really valuable resource. It's not being used recently. It'd be good to go back and look at that resource and use that for training. Because deaf people secretary chair, what's the difference? What does that mean? What's that? So that training to explain what the different roles are, what people are required to do, that kind of training can be really useful. So maybe that's something to look at creating. Maybe other organisations can provide those skills and work together to provide that training. But please, any ideas for things you want to look at, that's something we can cover
any of the DSP partners. So you may already have links with BDA or with Deaf Action or Deaf Connections. If you approach one of those organisations, then they will make sure that the Deaf Sector Partnership knows, because we want to be coordinated. We don't just want it all being random and disorganised. So SCOD really has a role of being an information hub. So if any requests come in, we would make sure that SCOD knows that who's doing what, so that we're not duplicating and so on. The same goes for public bodies as well. We'll be encouraging them to come into make an inquiry centrally through SCOD of the Deaf Sector Partnership, and then we'll decide who's best placed to deal with that organisation. But I think also it's important to say that you or your group doesn't have to be supported by or affiliated to any organisation to have your voices heard. But if you want it to be fed into the NAG process, you'll need to feed your information through SCOD, which is collecting everything in together. Of course, the other point though is that later the first draft national plan will be out for consultation. That will be a public consultation. Anyone can respond as an individual or as a group directly. So there will be lots of opportunities to influence, and really I think you have a lot of choice about how you want to participate, whether you want support or who you want to support you.
Just related to that before the next question, as I mentioned earlier, within the Deaf Sector Partnership, everyone has their own unit and have their own policies. So, maybe Deaf Connections would be able to provide, for example, training on forum. If you want to look at charter training, that's something you can look at. So there absolutely is resources there that can be shared, and different organisations that they're available for people that can be shared. Okay, and we have one more question. We have one more question. I just want to make sure that people have the right information, and this is really my last question. Would people involved in that group, will they be provided training before things continue in the NAG? So when people join the NAG, will they be provided training?
There'll be an induction session initially after people are recruited, so that they're really clear about their roles on the group and what's expected of them. After that, I think we'll need to see what support